So, in this next segment here, we want to get into the ways that we do editing in GIS, some of the key workflows, whether it's to edit existing stuff or to draw new things. Okay, so there's two ways to start editing in ArcGIS. Excuse me. One is from the editor toolbar. So if you right click on your toolbar, empty toolbar space, and you can load up your editor toolbar. And all the commands are grayed out until you start editing. So you hit editor, start editing, and it brings up this dialog and shows you all of the vector data layers that you have, which are available for editing, and you select which one you want, and you're off to the races. The other way is to navigate through your table of contents, and you then just right click on the layer that you want, hit edit features through that right click context menu, and then hit start editing. And then instead of having to browse to this one, it'll just take you right into an edit session. When that in both cases, when that happens, certain commands on the editor toolbar will come to life and be available for actual editing. Some of the nuances of editing, starting, saving, and stopping. So when you start, you just have to do that. Of course, you have to have somewhere to start. Now, because your time is valuable, you've got busy schedules, and because I'm hoping that as a ArcGIS user you become increasingly paranoid and untrusting of anything that ArcGIS does, you should save very frequently, as frequently as you're willing to redraw something. So if you start an edit session and you're drawing and you're drawing and you're just this beautiful layer that you've been working on and working on and working on, don't be stupid. Save that very, 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 very frequently, because if it crashes, you're screwed. And one thing that people get confused on when it comes to editing in ArcGIS is that you are editing the actual data set. Yes, those changes will be reflected in the drawing, but they have nothing to do with saving the drawing itself. So if ArcMap document crashes, you don't really care as long as you've been saving those edits frequently. So that's really, really important. Okay. Whoops, skipped over that on accident. So the editor toolbar, once you've got different commands active on this, and you're editing in a layer, you'll have some commands that you can access from the editor pull-down menu, and some other commands that are accessed up top here. We'll go through a few of those. Everything now in editing since I think 10.0, it might be 10.1, I'm getting confused now, relies on what Esri refers to as feature templates. Feature templates are a little weird at first, but when you realize what they're trying to do is encourage you to think about your symbology, your attributing, and your drawing in one step. And so that'll make more sense as we move ahead here. What happens is when you start an edit session, then the little Create Features toolbar, which is one of these buttons here, this little panel will usually pop up on the right hand side, often try and dock to your right hand side, and then it'll have features in it, and construction tools. And so if you've gone to the effort of applying a symbology for a particular layer, so let's say you have a campsite layer or a roads layer, and you've got freeways, local roads, and major highways. What this allows you to do is before you start drawing, you choose which of those that you want to attribute it with. And then you choose what you want to draw, whether it's a line, freehand sketch, etc. And so sometimes it tries to automatically make these for you, but then you can also hit this this little button up here to manage the template properties and create one. And there's a little wizard that you can walk you through for doing that. When you're actually editing, then there's a little feature construction toolbar that can pop up here. It does pop up on its own, and this gives you some different ways to snap. You can snap to endpoints, you can snap to midpoints, to snap to intersections, various vertices, etc. And then when you're drawing, you're just using the left click, and you're just adding vertices, and you're just moving your mouse, adding vertices where there's red. And then when you're done, you can either hit double click, or you can hit F2 to finish the sketch, or you can right click. And if you right click anytime you're at a vertice, you can always close out the sketch and finish it. You can delete it, and then you have access to those snap modes. You can enter in absolute coordinates or relative coordinates if you want. So there's a whole bunch of ways that this can help you draw more precisely other than just eyeballing it. So that right click context becomes really important. Just some terminology. All of the segments on a polyline or polygon are the stretches in between vertices, and these vertices or vertexes are where you actually click or specify an actual coordinate. The snapping, as I mentioned, is really important. The variety of ways in which you can do this. There's manual snapping where you specify it each time. There's auto snapping where you can turn a snap mode on with this snap toolbar here. And there's also some very clever tools for tracing and snapping along other features, etc. One thing you should be aware of, for example, if you're doing polygons and you want mutually exclusive classifications, the autocomplete polygon tool is a really powerful tool for making sure that, in some ways you can think of it as enforcing a topology, but making sure that that the polygons that you draw that are adjacent to each other truly do share a common geometry between them. So check out the help link on that if you are finding yourself doing lots of editing. Once you have a feature and you've drawn a feature, you can edit its sketch properties. And so, for example, you might have something and it's kind of roughed in, but you want to edit it and make it more precise. So you can edit that. You can, if you've made a shapefile that actually has Z data for elevation or M for thickness, you can also manually edit those. There's a little Z command you can add so that you can draw 3D vector geometry instead of just 2D vector geometry, and you can set these Z values as you're drawing them, which can be quite helpful. There are a variety of commands for editing existing features once you already have something, whether it's something you imported and got from somewhere else or it's something you've drawn. You can edit individual vertices, like we showed in the previous slide. You can manually move them with this command. You can delete them with that command. You can add new vertices to create more lines in between. You can separate, reshape, split, flip, blah blah blah. There's all sorts of different editing features, and the help again on this is really useful for kind of getting a feel for what these different things do. Most of them are sort of common sense kind of modify features commands, but and if you're coming from a CAD world, these will make a lot of sense to you. When you're drawing and when you're editing, it's really helpful to be able to effectively select individual features so that you can edit or modify them, and just modify those as opposed to modifying everything. So don't forget about your attribute table and being able to go in and select by attributes. For in this case, to find this particular rock type here, this Nuon dolomite, and you can select all those features and then make some edits to all of those at once, for example. This process of editing, there's a specific type of editing that we refer to as digitizing. which is where you're taking some other existing feature or layer. So it could be in the case of this poor girl, this is a paper map she's pasted on here, and then got some appropriate scaling for, and then she's going through and hand digitizing to get digital representation of these things. You can also do on-screen digitization, where instead of doing this on a big tablet, hardly anybody does this anymore, what you're doing is you're basing this off a scanned image. And so then you have a scanned raster image, but you want to get vector data off of it, and so you trace on that. In addition, scan data can sometimes be automatically digitized to recognize and classify features, but it almost always requires some manual editing and fixing, because the algorithms rarely get everything right. So that digitizing process of, say, a scanned image, you're just creating vector data from some other source here. And so here is an image, and it looks like maybe what I'm trying to do is get some different parcels or some fences that separate these things. And so I would just start an edit session and start drawing these features in. The tablet is this guy, what this is a large format scanner, and this is largely equated to death to these tablets because these things are huge. They take up lots of space, and most people prefer to be able to zoom in and out. And you can more accurately digitize with scanned images. So even if you have old paper maps or scanned images, we tend to use digitizing on the screen as opposed to digitizing manually. There are a few of these floating around on campus still. So when you do digitize, whether it's on a tablet or whether it's on the screen, there's always error in doing that. And so what we're looking at here is a frequency distribution of position errors, where these are just a comparison to the digitized. These are digitized points and how far off they are from reality. And so in practice, your errors are random. Typically, we assume that they're sort of normally distributed about 0. It's a good thing if they are. If not, you've got bias in your digitization. So, for example, if it was on this tablet, you might have clicked, in a biased fashion and always to the right of something, as opposed to sometimes getting it to the right, sometimes getting it to the left, etc. So one source of bias can be blunders, and this is a place where those snap modes can be helpful, or topological enforcement rules. So things like undershoots, overshoots, fake nodes where there shouldn't be. There's all sorts of dangling nodes. These are all sort of blunders that can take place and should be aware of. It's very easy to get these sort of situations when you're just manually drawing and editing. So that kind of covers editing workflows, and the next subtopic we'll get into in the next podcast segment is on attributes and attributing.